I was on my third cup of coffee when Caleb called, and the mill's fluorescent lights were doing that thing they did near the end of a long shift, buzzing at a pitch that lived just behind your eyes. It was Thursday, last day of my rotation. I always drove home Thursday nights with my hands aching and my ears ringing, counting down to 2 days of not smelling sawdust. "You doing anything this weekend?" Caleb said. "Sleeping," I said. "Wrong. We're hiking." That was how it always started with Caleb. Not a question, not an invitation, a declaration, as if the thing were already done and you were just catching up. I'd known him since we were 7, and he'd been dragging me into things that same way since 2nd grade. That tone, the one that assumed agreement before you'd opened your mouth, had gotten us into more trouble than I could count. Half the time, it worked out fine. The other half, you ended up wet or lost or explaining yourself to someone's parents. "Found something online," he said. "Forum post from 2006. A trail up in the Allagash, off the logging roads, unmarked, leads to a pond called Loon Pond. No crowds, untouched, old growth and clean water. Nate's uncle has a hunting camp near the valley. We stay there Friday night, hike Saturday morning." I stood with the phone against my ear and thought about what my grandfather used to say. He was 5th generation Aroostook County, same as me, and he'd worked those forests his whole life. He knew the country the way you only know a place that raised you. The ponds and ridges and old cuts, the names that hadn't changed in 100 years. He used to talk about old paths, not old like well-traveled, old like left alone on purpose. "There are places the Penobscot didn't go," he told me once when I was about 12 and we were sitting on his porch in late summer. Not because they were scared. They weren't scared of much, but because they knew better than to walk where the world gets thin. I'd asked him what that meant, the world getting thin. He'd said, "Like old ice in spring, looks solid, holds you fine for a while. But there's spots where it's barely there, and if you're standing on one when it decides to give, there's no time to wish you'd gone around." I thought about that for maybe 3 seconds. Then Caleb said the cabin had a wood stove, and Nate's uncle kept good whiskey in the cabinet, and by the time I hung up, I'd already said yes. Nate picked me up at 6 Friday evening. The air had that first real cold edge that meant summer was done, and the September light was going long and golden. Abby was already in the back seat with her boots up on the door panel, scrolling her phone. She had a way of looking completely at ease outdoors, like the cold and the mud and the trees were old friends. "Bring 3 layers next time," she said without looking up. "I brought 2, I said. "I know." The camp was 3 hours north, down roads that went from state route to county road to logging track over about 40 miles. Nate's uncle's place was a 1-room cabin with a wood stove, 4 cots, a hand-pump sink that groaned when you worked it, and a shelf of paperbacks that had been swelling with humidity for decades. It smelled like wood smoke and old wool, the specific smell of a place that remembers every winter it's survived. Caleb already had a fire going when we arrived. We cooked on the wood stove, canned beans, bread, sausages Abby had packed in a cooler. We talked the way you talk with people you've known most of your life, easy and unfocused, jumping from hockey to work to nothing in particular. Caleb read the forum post aloud. "Trail dog Maine 06, some guy who'd stumbled on the pullout by accident 6 miles down the logging road, hiked 4 miles in, found a pond so clear and still he didn't think anyone had visited it in years. No trail on any map. Just a wider spot in the gravel and blue blazes on the trees." "Nothing about a sign?" Abby asked. "Just says it's worth the trip," Caleb said. We turned in around 10. I lay on my cot and waited for the quiet that came in places like that. The good, full quiet of nowhere in particular. It didn't come. Instead, the valley made its own sounds. The wind moved through the trees in a way that wasn't quite even. There was something else, too, sometime around midnight. Footsteps outside, slow and steady, coming along the north wall of the cabin. Not hurried, not hesitant, just paced. Heel and toe, the particular rhythm of someone walking at a comfortable, sustainable rate. I told myself, deer. The pace was wrong for deer. I lay still and counted without meaning to. 8, 9, 10 steps along the north wall, then the corner, then the east wall, then the south, then the west, circling the cabin. I waited for it to stop. It didn't. I counted 2 full circuits before I managed to close my eyes. I woke twice more in the night to find them still going, and each time I lay there counting, and each time I got my eyes closed again, eventually. By morning, I'd decided it was nothing. An animal. The acoustics of the valley. I said nothing about it at breakfast. We drove out at 8:30, following directions Caleb had written from the forum post. The logging road ran straight through second-growth spruce, crowded and same age and monotonous. Nate drove with his elbow out the window. I noted the odometer as we left camp. 199,847. The pullout appeared about 6 miles in. A wider spot off the road, soft gravel edged with grass, room for 2 vehicles. We got out. The forest behind the pullout was different from the second growth along the road. Old trees, thick-trunked spruce and maple and birch, the canopy high and uneven. You could feel the age of it. My grandfather would have said old forest had more history in it. I thought he was right. A rusted chain hung between 2 posts at knee height across the pullout entrance. On the left post, a faded orange square of reflective tape. On the right post, nothing. Behind the right post, a birch tree, 60 years old at least, pale-barked and leaning slightly toward the road. The birch had been growing for a long time, and the thing it had been growing around was a wooden sign. I say growing around because that was the accurate description. The sign was old enough that the tree had incorporated it. The lower corners had been pressed into the bark, which had curled and swelled around the wood like a hand slowly closing. About a third of the sign still showed. The top portion carried painted letters, faded nearly invisible. Trail to Loon Tooth Pond, 8.4 miles round trip. Not Loon Pond. Loon Tooth Pond. Trail Dog Maine 06 had either misread it or never stood close enough to see. Below the painted text, the remaining wood was covered in carvings. Not painted, carved, cut deep with something sharp. The letters were uneven, compressed, like someone writing in a hurry or in bad light. Different entirely from the measured painted text above. "Someone carved rules," Abby said. We stood in a line and read them. Caleb read aloud, one by one, in the flat voice he used when he thought something was being dramatic and didn't deserve the satisfaction. 1. Follow only blue markers. If you see another color, close your eyes and walk backward until you find blue again. "Okay," Caleb said. 2. If you pass the same landmark twice, do not acknowledge it aloud. Pretend you're seeing it for the first time. Nate laughed once through his nose. 3. Count your group every 30 minutes. If the number changes, do not speak to anyone you did not arrive with. Abby had her phone out and was photographing the sign. I watched her move around it to find the angle, getting close enough that her jacket sleeve nearly touched the bark. 4. Do not check any device that measures distance. Trust only the blue markers. "There goes Nate's whole personality," Caleb said. Nate had a GPS unit clipped to his pack strap. He looked at Caleb and said nothing, which was how he expressed that something wasn't funny. 5. If you hear footsteps behind you matching your pace exactly, do not turn around, stop, or run. Nobody said anything after that one. I read it a second time. The carving was deepest on Rule 5. You could see where the tool had slipped and scored a long line below the final word, like the hand holding it had pressed too hard. Or shook. "It's a joke," Nate said. "Trail creepypasta. People carve things for atmosphere." "The forum post doesn't mention any of this," Abby said, still photographing. "Maybe he didn't look close." "These are old, Nate." She said it without heat, and she was right. The wood in the carved channels was the same weathered gray as the surrounding surface. Lichen had found the deepest cuts. This wasn't recent. I put the age conservatively at 20 to 40 years, and I didn't rule out older. I looked past the chain. The first blue blaze was visible on a spruce about 15 feet in, a neat rectangle of paint, vivid and clean, much newer than the carvings. Someone had been out here recently enough to maintain those blazes. "The blazes are new," I said. Abby looked at them. "Yes, but the carvings aren't." "No." We stood with that. The wind moved in the canopy. Somewhere behind us, a bird called once and didn't repeat. Caleb stepped over the chain. He did it without ceremony, just stepped over and kept moving, pack adjusting on his shoulders, hands going into his jacket pockets. "Blue blazes, clear trail, good weather." He glanced back. "Come on." Nate went next. Then Abby. I put one hand on the right post as I stepped over. The wood was cold, colder than the air, colder than it should have been in September morning sun, and rougher than old wood usually felt. I stepped over and the chain was behind me. The first mile was good. I mean that without qualification. Genuinely good. The trail was clear and well worn, the blue blazes appearing every 100 feet, the canopy high enough to let the light come through at a low September angle that turned everything golden. The smells were perfect. Fallen leaves going soft, cold mud, spruce resin, something deeper and colder underneath that was the first breath of what the forest would smell like in October. We fell into the rhythm that comes naturally when you've hiked with the same people for years. Nate in front, fastest. Caleb behind him, talking. Abby and me in the back, not talking much, just watching the trees. There was something I noticed about a quarter mile in, something that nagged at me without quite landing. There were no stumps. In the Allagash, you always find stumps. The whole region has been logged in various ways since the 1800s, and even the oldest-looking sections carry the evidence. Stumps gone moss-soft, the faint lines of old skid trails pressed into the soil. The marks are subtle in old growth, but they're there. There were none here. No stumps, no tape, no old tracks. The forest looked like it had grown undisturbed for longer than I wanted to think about. I mentioned it to Abby. She looked at the trees. "I noticed that too," she said. About a mile in, the trail passed a lightning-split birch on the left. A big tree split clean down the middle, both halves still standing and still living, growing outward at angles like an open book. 50 meters further, a stream crossing. Flat stones set across a narrow, cold creek, water running clear over rounded rock. We crossed single file. On the far side, the trail climbed gently, and through a gap in the trees on the right, I could see a long slope of fern going gold at the edges, rolling down toward a darkness of old spruce below. It was beautiful. The kind of place you feel lucky to have found. "Beautiful out here," Caleb said. It was. I breathed in the cold and the resin and the turned leaves, and I let the mill and the long Thursday and the buzzing lights fall away. This was the thing. Caleb had been right, and I was glad he'd called. I didn't know what was coming. I didn't know that within a few hours I'd be standing at that stream crossing again with my mouth dry and my hands cold, and a specific, nauseating certainty taking shape in my chest. I didn't know that the lightning-split birch, which I had noted once and filed as a simple landmark, would become the most frightening thing I'd ever seen in my life. I walked. The blue blazes marked the way. The September light moved in the canopy above us, slow and golden. I'd see that birch again and again and again. We passed the lightning-split birch at 9:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I checked my watch right after, the way you do when something catches your eye and you want to anchor it to something concrete. The birch stood the same as it had the day before, both halves growing outward, pale bark, the split running clean from about 8 feet up down to the root swell. I noted it and kept walking. Behind me, I heard Caleb say something to Nate about the Bruins' opening roster, and Nate responding with the particular flat tone that meant he half agreed but wasn't going to say so. The trail felt good still. The air was cooler than the day before, the September chill sitting a little lower, and the sky through the canopy was the kind of pale gray that in Maine usually means the sun is just behind it and might break through by noon. The blue blazes came steady and regular, one every 100 feet or so, each one a clean rectangle of bright paint on whatever tree happened to be closest to the trail edge. At 11:15, we hit the stream crossing. Same flat stones, same cold water running clear over the rounded rock bed. Nate went first, hopping stone to stone without slowing. Caleb behind him. Careful. I went last, and on the far side I paused and looked back at the water. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just a stream. I don't know why I looked back. Nate had his GPS out before we were 20 feet from the crossing. He tilted the screen toward himself and looked at it for a moment, then tilted it away. Not putting it back in his pocket, just angling it so the face was toward his hip, like he didn't want anyone else to see, or like he didn't want the forest to see. I noticed it and said nothing. Rule 4. None of us mentioned it. 3.2 miles, he said anyway. How? Caleb said. That's what it says. Caleb shrugged. Phones are garbage out here. That was the first time he said that. It wouldn't be the last. At 11:47, the trail curved around a granite outcrop and opened onto a wider section where the trees pulled back on both sides. And there it was, the boulder. Gray granite, roughly the size of a compact car set on its end, with a vertical split running through it from top to bottom. The split was about 4 inches wide at its narrowest, wider at the base, and the way the two halves had shifted slightly over however many centuries meant that from a certain angle, the angle you got when you were walking north along the trail, the gap looked exactly like a grin, wide and flat and a little too long, a tooth-shaped rock with a tooth-shaped smile. Weird rock, Abby said. Very, I said. We kept walking. We stopped for lunch at 12:23 in a flat section where a fallen spruce had cleared enough canopy to let in a gray wash of light. Sandwiches, trail mix, water from our bottles. Caleb ate fast the way he always did, like someone was going to take the food. Nate sat on his pack and looked at his GPS again, this time holding it openly, turning it in different directions as if orientation was the problem. Something's wrong with the elevation data, he said. How wrong? I asked. It says we've gained 50 feet since the trailhead. Nobody said anything to that. We'd been climbing for the better part of an hour before lunch. Not steep climbing, but a consistent uphill grade, the kind that builds quietly in your thighs and lower back. 50 feet was not right. Not even close to right. Phones are garbage out here, Caleb said, and stood up and started packing his wrapper away. We kept walking. The trail climbed after lunch, real climbing this time, switchbacks cutting across a slope steep enough that I was using my hands on the turns, pushing off my knees on the straightaways. My thighs started burning around 1 p.m. The canopy closed in tighter on the slope, the spruce growing dense and dark, and the blue blazes shifted to the uphill side of the trees so you could see them from below. Good trail maintenance. Someone knew what they were doing. At 1:17 p.m., the trail curved around a granite outcrop. I knew before I saw it. I think part of me had known for a while in the way you know something is wrong before you can name what it is. A low-level wrongness sitting in the chest, not quite dread, not quite nausea, just a not right. The boulder. Same gray granite. Same vertical split. Same flat, wide grin pointing north. I stopped walking. Abby was right behind me and walked into my shoulder. Her hand came up and gripped my elbow. Not a stumble, not an accident. She'd seen it too. We'd climbed 200 feet of switchbacks. We'd walked an hour since lunch. There was no logical way. Caleb and Nate were 10 feet ahead, still moving. Caleb was in the middle of saying something about a trade the Bruins had made in August. Weird rock, I said. I said it loud enough to carry, clear enough to land. Caleb glanced back. Yeah, he said, and kept talking about the trade. Abby's grip on my elbow tightened once, then released. She moved up beside me. Rule 2, she said, very quietly. Just those 2 words. I nodded. She'd understood before I did. Don't acknowledge it aloud. Pretend you're seeing it for the first time. I'd said the words out loud, the same words she'd said the first time, and Caleb and Nate had heard them and registered a boulder and moved on. That was right. That was what we needed. I kept walking. I did not look back at the boulder. At 1:52, Nate stopped in the middle of the trail. He was looking at his phone, and the expression on his face was the one he got when a number didn't add up. Nate was the kind of person who got genuinely upset by wrong numbers. Not angry, just a specific, focused frustration, like the number had personally misled him. 8 miles, he said. What? Caleb said. Straight line distance from the trailhead, 8 miles. He turned the phone so we could see. The GPS showed a blue dot and a starting pin, and the line between them was a long, clean diagonal. And 50 feet elevation gain total. We've been climbing for 2 hours, I said. I know that. The trail's been going uphill since lunch. I know that too. We all looked at the phone. The blue dot sat 8 miles from the trailhead on what the map showed as solid, unbroken forest. No trail, no road, nothing. The GPS didn't know this trail existed. The line between our position and the start was straight in a way that made no sense given the switchbacks we'd walked. The GPS is picking up interference, Caleb said. Magnetic rock, maybe. There's granite all through here. It throws the signal. He said it with confidence, like he knew what he was talking about. He didn't know what he was talking about. None of us did. But the words made a shape that felt like an explanation, and we all stepped into it, because the alternative was to stand there with no explanation at all. Phones are garbage out here, Nate said. He said it the way Caleb had been saying it. Flat, final, a door closing. He put the phone in his pocket. We kept walking. At 2:15, the stream crossing. Same flat stones, same cold water. I went last again, and this time I didn't look back. At 2:34, the lightning split birch, both halves growing outward. Same pale bark, same clean split running down from 8 feet up. I checked my watch. 2:34 p.m. We'd been on the trail for nearly 5 hours. We'd passed this birch at 9:47 in the morning. There was no way to make those facts sit next to each other without one of them being wrong. Caleb and Nate were ahead, not talking now. The conversation had dried up sometime around the second boulder sighting, and we'd been walking in a silence that felt different from the comfortable silence of the morning. This silence had weight to it. It pressed. At 2:58, the boulder again. The grin. I looked at it for exactly as long as it took me to register it and look away. My mouth was dry. I counted, not on purpose. It just happened, the same way it had happened in the night outside the cabin. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nate, Caleb, Abby, me. 4. The number sat in my head and wouldn't leave. 4. I counted again to make sure. Still 4. Nobody spoke. We walked. At 3:15, Caleb stopped. We should head back, he said. 3 words that cost him something. Caleb didn't quit, didn't turn around, didn't admit that something was beyond him. The fact that he said it at all told me how wrong the afternoon had become inside his head, even if he wasn't saying the specific wrong thing out loud. We turned around. We walked. The forest looked the same in both directions. The same dark spruce, the same pine needle floor, the blue blazes now on the opposite side of the trees as we moved south. I watched the blazes. Watched them the way you watch something when you're not sure what you're looking for, but you're sure you'll know it when you see it. The trail descended. The switchbacks came in reverse, the slope now downhill under our boots. My knees complained. We walked for a long time without seeing any landmark I recognized, which was strange because the trail had been distinctive enough on the way in. The birch should have appeared within the first 20 minutes. It didn't appear for an hour. At 4:23, through the trees to our left, I caught a glint of metal, dull and distant, catching what little light came through the canopy. I stopped, looked. Metal, in a forest with no roads. "The truck," Abby said. We pushed off the trail through 20 feet of undergrowth and came out of the tree line into the pullout. The truck sat exactly where Nate had parked it, driver's side facing us, gravel undisturbed. The rusted chain hung between its posts. Behind the right post, the birch with the half-consumed sign. We stood in a line and looked at it. We'd been walking away from this spot since 9 o'clock in the morning. We'd never doubled back, never looped around, never retraced anything deliberately. The blue blazes had been consistent and clear the whole way. We'd been following the trail out, away from the trailhead, all day, and the trail had brought us back to the beginning. Nate walked to the truck and stood at the driver's side, looking at the hood. Then he looked at the dash through the windshield. "Eli," he said. I came around to his side. The odometer read 200,694. It had read 199,847 when we parked. I had written the number in my head that morning the way I'd been taught to note things. The way my grandfather taught me, pay attention to what's there. It'll matter later. 199,847. The difference was 847 miles. The truck hadn't moved. "Odometer's malfunction," Caleb said. His voice was steady. "Old trucks, electrical issues. It could have been rolling up the whole time we were sitting here." 847 miles, Nate said. "I know how many miles. It rolled up 847 miles while it was sitting still. I'm saying it malfunctioned." Nobody pushed it further. Caleb's jaw was tight and he was looking at a point somewhere past the truck, past the trees, past anything visible. He wasn't looking at the odometer. He was deciding, again, to step over something instead of around it. Abby had moved to the birch tree. She was standing close to it. Too close, her face near the bark where the old sign disappeared into the wood. I came up beside her. "Eli," she said. There were new carvings on the birch. Not on the sign itself, on the bark beside it lower down, fresh and pale against the darker surface. The wood in the cuts was still bright. These hadn't been here this morning. I leaned in and read them. Walked since 1847. Still walking. Trail never ends. Below that, more words, carved in the same fresh cuts. The letters uneven and pressed deep. The 47 walk before you. I stood there and read it twice. Then a third time. The numbers made a specific kind of sense that I didn't want them to make. The kind of sense that you feel in your stomach before your brain has finished processing it. 47, I said. Abby looked at me. +4, I said. That's 51. I turned and counted. Nate at the truck, Caleb by the chain, Abby beside me. 1, 2, 3, 4. 47 plus 4 equals 51. Nobody had carved those words. Nobody had been at the trailhead while we were on the trail. There were no other vehicles, no other prints in the gravel, no sign of anyone. The carvings were fresh, hours old at most, and the wood was still pale, still raw, still carrying the clean smell of recently cut birch. The number sat in my chest and wouldn't move. Caleb came over. He read the carvings. He stood there for a long moment with his hands at his sides, very still, and I watched his face do the thing it did when he was refusing to be afraid. The jaw, the eyes going flat, the slight forward set of the shoulders. "Kids," he said. "Someone hiked in while we were out there and carved this. It's a setup. Someone found the same forum post, beat us here, carved some nonsense to mess with whoever showed up." "When?" Nate said. "While we were hiking. There's no other car. There are no other footprints." "I don't know when, Nate. I'm saying that's what happened." He said it with the full force of a man who needed it to be true. I almost believed him. I wanted to believe him. The alternative, the thing the numbers were saying, the thing the fresh carvings and the dead odometer and the looping trail were all pointing toward, I wasn't ready to say it out loud. I counted again, without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 4. The trees were very quiet around us. The September light had dropped lower, going toward evening, and the shadows in the forest were longer now and closer together. 47 plus 4, 51. The numbers matched. Nobody suggested waiting until morning. I think we all understood, without saying it, that morning wasn't something we could count on anymore. The light was already going. That flat, gray September dusk that comes fast in northern Maine. The sky dropping from pale to dark in about 40 minutes once it decides to. Caleb was at the truck before any of us moved. He had the doors unlocked and the engine running by the time I crossed the pullout. We got in, Nate driving, Caleb in the passenger seat, Abby and me in the back. The cab smelled like the morning, coffee from the thermos, dried mud from our boots, the faint piney resin we'd carried in on our jackets. Normal smells, the kind that belonged to a truck after a day of hiking. I focused on them and tried not to think about the numbers on the odometer or the carvings on the birch. Nate put it in reverse, swung around, and pointed us back down the logging road. I started counting trees. I don't know why. The counting just started, the same way it had twice already that day. Same as it had outside the cabin the night before. It wasn't a decision. My mind just latched onto something to do with itself. 1, 2. The headlights were on, pushing against the dusk, picking out the spruce trunks going past on both sides. 3, 4. At 5, I saw it. A blue blaze on a spruce about 30 feet off the road to the left. Clean rectangle of paint, same bright shade as every other blaze we'd followed all day. I said nothing. At 23, another one. Right side this time. At 67, the road widened, the trees pulled back on both sides, and the headlights swept across gravel and the rusted chain and the birch tree with its consumed sign. The pullout. Nate stopped the truck. We sat there with the engine running and the headlights on the chain. The birch stood in the beam with its half-consumed sign, the bark curled around the wood, the new carvings still pale and raw on the surface. The first blue blaze was visible on the spruce beyond, 15 feet into the dark. "We drove the whole road," Caleb said. "Yes," Nate said. "We went the right direction." "Yes." Nobody answered what came next. The blue blazes had been there on both sides the whole way. The logging road wasn't a road anymore, or it hadn't been one for a long time. Everything past the chain was trail. Maybe it always had been. "Turn around," Caleb said. "We try the other direction." Nate turned around. The odometer read 200,694 when we started moving again. I watched it. 200,695, 200,696, 200,697. The headlights hit the road and the trees went past, and the blue blazes appeared in the darkness on both sides, regular as breathing. One every 30 seconds. 200,731, 200,744, 200,758. The road was rough, and Nate kept the speed steady and the blazes kept coming, and I stopped counting them because counting wasn't doing anything for me anymore. At 200,771, Abby said, "Stop the truck!" Her voice was flat and certain. Nate stopped. 2 people stood at the road's edge. Left side, maybe 15 feet ahead of the front bumper, at the boundary where the headlights thinned to dark. A man. Wool trousers, suspenders over a collarless shirt, heavy boots with the square toe of old work footwear. A woman beside him in a long gray dress and a bonnet, the strings hanging loose at her chin. They were standing at the edge of the tree line, but their legs were moving, knees lifting, boots pressing down, the full mechanical rhythm of walking. They weren't going anywhere. Their feet came down in the same spot every time, the same patch of gravel, the same inch of road edge. Walking in place. The man's head turned. Slow, the way a head turns when something behind you makes a sound. He looked at the truck. His face was ordinary enough in the headlights. Wide jaw, short beard, the plain features of a working man. But his eyes were empty in a way I still have trouble describing. Not blank, not glazed. Empty. Like there was nothing generating anything behind them. Like windows in a house where nobody had lived for a very long time, and the glass had just kept sitting there, reflecting. His mouth moved. No sound came through the windshield. I watched his lips for a moment, and whatever he was saying, he'd been saying it a long time. Nate floored it. The truck lurched forward, and I grabbed the door handle, and Abby grabbed my arm, and we went past them, close enough that the woman's dress moved in the air behind us. I did not look back. Rule 5. I stared at the road ahead and held the door handle. Don't look back, I said. We drove. 200,772, 200,773. Eli. Abby's voice was very quiet. She was facing forward, but her eyes were tilted up toward the rearview mirror. I looked at the rearview mirror. The mirror showed the road behind us, dark and empty, the taillights painting the gravel red. It showed the back seat. It showed Abby on my left. It also showed 2 other people. The man was behind Caleb's seat, pressed against the door, his legs moving against the floor mat, knees lifting, boots pressing down on nothing. The same rhythm. The woman was between Abby and me, her gray dress spread across the seat, bonnet forward, legs doing the same. They both faced straight ahead, looking through the windshield at the road, seeing nothing that I could tell. Their bodies swayed with the movement of the truck, natural as passengers. I turned my head, slowly. The seat was empty. Abby beside me, the space behind Caleb's headrest, the rear window and the dark road beyond. I looked back at the mirror. They were still there. His legs pumping, her dress shifting. Rule 3. Do not speak to anyone you did not arrive with. I held the rule steady in my head and looked at the mirror and kept my mouth shut. I did not turn around again. I did not say a word to either of them. I looked at the mirror for as long as it took me to understand that understanding wasn't going to help. And then I looked at the road. Don't talk to them, I said, to Abby, to the truck, to whoever needed to hear it. I know, Abby said. Caleb had half turned in the passenger seat. He was looking at the mirror too. He turned back to the front without a word. Nate drove faster, 40 miles an hour on the logging track. The truck bounced hard on the ruts and the trees crowded close on the curves. 50, 60, too fast. The kind of speed that puts you in the tree line if you miss one curve. Nobody said slow down. 200,794. The road narrowed. The canopy started to close overhead. The trees leaned in from both sides and the headlights were barely keeping up with the curves. And ahead, the rusted chain. Nate hit the brakes. The truck slid on gravel and stopped 6 feet short of the chain, the headlights washing over the birch and the sign and the trail beyond. Back. Again. I checked the mirror. The back seat was empty. Abby got out and walked to the road's edge and bent over with her hands on her knees. I'm going to be sick, she said. She wasn't sick. She stood there and breathed, slow and deliberate, until the breathing evened out. I stood beside her and didn't say anything because there was nothing useful to say. Behind us, Caleb's door opened, his boots on the gravel. He walked toward the chain and stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking at the trail. I got out and walked toward the sign. I don't know what I intended. Look at the carvings again, maybe. I took 3 steps and then 4, and the 4th step didn't stop. I mean that exactly. My boot came down and my weight went forward and my other leg swung and I was walking toward the chain, and when I tried to stop, when I sent the signal, the way you've been sending signals to your legs your entire life without ever having to think about it. Nothing happened. My legs kept going, past the chain, onto the trail. "I can't stop," I said. Caleb was 3 feet to my left. He had a strange expression, not afraid exactly. The look of someone who has been waiting for the bad thing and feels almost relieved now that the waiting is over. He stepped forward. "I can't stop either," he said. Abby behind me, fast footsteps at first, like she was turning, trying to run the other way, then slowing, then the same pace as mine. And Nate, one quiet word under his breath, and then his boots on the trail behind us. The forest took us in. The walking felt wrong in a specific way. It wasn't painful. That was the hardest part to explain later. My legs moved easily without the effort of a full day's hike, like they'd been waiting all day to do exactly this. I kept trying to stop. Every few minutes I poured everything I had into going still, and my legs would hesitate for half a step, and then the rhythm would come back. The others were doing the same. I could see it in Caleb's hands, clenching and releasing at his sides, the way Nate's jaw was set. They came out of the trees one by one. First a man, stepping from between two spruce trunks to the left, head down, legs moving in the same pace as ours. Then a woman from the right. Then more from both sides of the trail, joining the line the way water joins a current. Men in work clothes. Women in long dresses with shawls across their shoulders. A child in patched pants, maybe 8 years old, walking with the same blank ease as the adults. None of them looked at us. None of them looked at each other. They simply walked. I counted. I could not stop counting. 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. Plus us, 51. The numbers matched every time. The landmarks came around, the birch, the stream, cold water over my boots in the dark, the flat stones slick under my feet, the boulder with its long granite grin, which I looked at and looked away from and said nothing about. The trail climbed, the canopy thinned, the procession crested a long ridge, and below, through the last of the trees, there was a clearing, wide and flat, maybe 200 feet across, with the shapes of buildings in it. Walls fallen in, roofs long gone, gray timber gone soft with decades of weather. But you could still read what they'd been. Bunkhouses. A larger building that might have been a cookhouse. Smaller outbuildings scattered at the edges. A camp that had tried to become a ruin and not quite finish the job. Camp 47. The procession moved down the slope and spread into the clearing, each figure pulling toward a specific spot the way iron moves toward a magnet. My legs carried me to the center, where a single post stood upright in the ground, the only thing in the clearing still standing straight. A heavy timber, 8 feet tall, sunk deep. The surface was covered in carved names, stacked in columns down every face. Dozens of them, tight together, the cuts still clear in the moonlight. The topmost name on the left column, Josiah Bartlett. Below him, 46 more. The man appeared at my shoulder. He was simply there. I hadn't seen him come. Compact, broad-chested, a red beard that had once been trimmed neat, wool coat, heavy boots, the dress of a working man from 177 years ago. His legs were doing the same shuffling walk as mine, his eyes empty and forward, but his lips were moving. I leaned close. No sound, or almost none. I had to get uncomfortably close before I could make anything out at all. "Remember us. Please remember us. Someone has to remember." Over and over. The same words, cycling, into the air of a clearing that had been holding them for longer than I'd been alive. I thought about my grandfather. I thought about old ice in spring and places where the world gets thin, and about the fact that he'd told me to pay attention because things would matter later. "I'll remember you," I said. His legs stopped. Not slowed. stopped. 3 full seconds. His boots flat on the ground. The first stillness I'd seen from any of them. His head turned. His eyes changed. Something was behind them now that hadn't been there. Something that had been waiting in a very small, very dark place for a very long time. "Josiah," he said. The voice came out cracked and dry, like paper that had been folded too many times. "My name is Josiah Bartlett. I was the foreman." His throat worked. "I led them out. I killed them all." The way he said it, not with drama, not performing the weight of it, just a fact he'd been carrying alone since before carrying was possible, finally finding somewhere to land. Then the emptiness came back. His eyes went flat and his legs started and he walked. I stood in the clearing with my own legs shuffling under me, 51 of us moving in the same night rhythm, and I held his name like something given to me to keep. Josiah Bartlett. I didn't let go of it. The moon moved, and I walked. That was the whole of it for a long time. The moon tracked across the sky above the clearing, and I walked circles around the ruins of Camp 47 with the rest of them. The 47 in their places, the 4 of us in ours, all of us moving in the same rhythm whether we wanted to or not. My legs had stopped feeling like mine. They just worked, steady and automatic, the way a clock runs whether or not anyone's watching. I tried to stop every circuit. Every time I came around past the post with the carved names, I'd put everything I had into stillness. I'd get half a step of hesitation. Then the rhythm came back. After a while, I stopped fighting every circuit and picked a smaller target. My right hand. Just the hand. I walked and I stared at it and I thought, fingers. Bend. Just this. The first twitch came after midnight. My index finger curled maybe a 1/4 inch. It wasn't much. It felt like the most important thing I'd ever done. I worked at it, circuit after circuit. The moon dropped. By the time I had a full fist, my arm was shaking from the effort of it, but I held it for a few seconds before concentration slipped. Hand first, then the wrist, then the elbow. I got my phone out in increments. Half a circuit to get my arm moving well enough to reach my jacket pocket, another half to get my fingers around it, another to pull it free. 12% battery. I tilted the screen toward the post, and the camera flash lit up the carved names in flat white light. I took 7 photos before my arm gave out. On the next circuit I checked. All 7 saved. 47 names. I had most of them. I spotted Abby once, on the far side of the clearing, her jacket in the dark, her legs moving in the same rhythm as the rest, her face too still. "Abby," I said. Her head turned. She blinked. "Still here," she said. Flat and distant, but she said it. "Keep fighting," I said. Her jaw tightened. "Good enough." The hum was the first thing I noticed changing. There had been a sound under everything all night. Not quite a sound. More something felt in the back teeth and behind the sternum. I'd stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing an air conditioner, but sometime in the hour before dawn it started fading. The 47 changed too. Their rhythm slowed. The shuffling got smaller. Several had drifted toward the post during the night, standing in a loose cluster there, their legs still moving but gradually, like a machine on its last power. The light changed. Still dark, but a different dark, the kind that means something is coming. I tried to stop. 3 seconds. My legs took over again. 3 seconds was more than I'd managed all night. "Something's changing," Abby said. She was closer than I'd realized, 10 feet off. "The hum," I said. "It's going." She nodded once, jaw set. "Fighting." I tried again. 5 seconds, then 8. I was sweating in the September cold, genuinely sweating, everything pouring into standing still on ground that had been trying to move me all night. Then I stopped for a full minute, shaking all over, fists clenched, but still. Standing still in a place that had refused to allow it. It was the best thing I'd ever done. I found Caleb near the collapsed bunkhouse. It's weakening. Dawn. Try now. His legs slowed further, stopped. He lurched forward like a man who'd been leaning into a wind that suddenly dropped, caught himself on the wall, stood there heaving. Fell once. Got up. Nate took 12 seconds the first time, 35 the second, and by the third try he was standing steady. Abby took longest. When I found her again, the blankness had come further up in her face, and I felt the drop in my chest, and I just started talking. Abby Sear, vet tech, 2 cats. You rode up here with your feet on Nate's door panel, and you photographed the rules, and you understood Rule 2 before any of us did. I paused. You're 28 years old, and you're standing in the Allagash, and I need you to stop walking. Her legs slowed. Abby. They stopped. The blankness cracked. Under it was exhaustion and something shakier than exhaustion. The face of someone who'd been very close to a place they might not have come back from. She sat down in the dirt of the clearing and put her head in her hands. We gave her a minute. The sky to the east was going from gray to pale. The 47 near the post had slowed to almost nothing, their leg movements barely there. They looked almost like they were standing still, if you didn't look too closely. We have to go, I said. We ran. The blue blazes were there in the early light, steady on the trees, and we followed them and didn't look back. The clearing fell away. I glanced once. The 47 were transparent now, visible only as shapes, the post with the names rising straight through them. Then the trail turned and they were gone. The landmarks came in reverse. The boulder, which I passed without a word. The stream, cold over my boots, flat stones underfoot. The birch, both halves still growing outward, pale in the morning light. The trail descended and the trees thinned and the pullout appeared ahead. We burst through into open air. Nate went straight to the truck, stood at the driver's door looking through the glass. Eli, he said. The odometer read 200,694, the same number it had read the night before. The truck hadn't moved. The dashboard clock read 6:47 a.m. We'd gone in around dusk, 7:30, maybe 8 p.m. We'd fought through the entire night. Dawn had broken past 5:30. We'd run 20 minutes back, 6:47 a.m. We'd been gone 10 hours inside. The clock said 47 minutes. Nobody asked how. There was no how that would fit into any sentence any of us could form. Nate got in the truck. We followed. He drove. The blue blazes were gone from the road. No paint on any tree the whole way out. The road just ran through ordinary second-growth spruce toward the county road and the state route and everything that existed outside this 4-mile stretch of the Allagash. This time, it let us go. I spent 3 months with the 7 photos. I enhanced them on my laptop until the carved names were readable and wrote all 47 into a notebook. Then I drove to the Aroostook County Historical Society on a Tuesday in November. The woman at the desk went to the back and came out with a folder, a payroll ledger, October 1847, for a logging camp on the Allagash watershed. 47 names. The ledger stopped in the second week of October with no closing entry, just the names and then nothing mid-page. Every name matched the carvings. I spent the next 6 weeks tracing descendants. 31 families. I drove to houses in Aroostook County and Penobscot County, and once to a suburb of Portland where a woman in her 60s listened to me on her front steps in the November cold and said her grandmother had always kept a photograph of a man who went into the woods in 1847 and never came back. I drove to Indian Island 3 times before Joseph Dana agreed to meet me. He was 83, with hands gnarled by arthritis and eyes that didn't need to perform anything. He listened to the whole story without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "My grandmother called it the walking ground, the earth wounded. She said the wound happened when men died wanting something so badly the want outlasted them." He was quiet a moment. "Everything can be healed, but wounds that old need old medicine." He agreed to come. He said he'd make some calls. October 17th, the anniversary. We gathered at the trailhead at 9. Descendants, tribal elders from 3 communities, a historian from the University of Maine, Caleb, Nate, Abby, who'd driven up from Portland. The rusted chain was gone. A new sign stood on a fresh post. In memory of the 47 of Camp 47. Lost, October 1847. Found October 2024. We walked in. The trail felt different. The pressing weight that had lived in the air before was quieter, like a room after a long argument. The blue blazes led us through, and the forest smelled like October, cold and clean and turning. The clearing appeared at the end of the trail. The ruins were the same. The post stood straight in the center. The 47 were visible at the edge of vision, transparent, their movements barely there, legs lifting and dropping in the smallest possible version of the rhythm they'd kept for 177 years. Joseph Dana stood near the post and spoke in Penobscot, low and steady, and I felt the words in my boots and my chest the way you feel a drum beat through a floor. I unfolded my notebook and read the first name. Josiah Bartlett. A woman stepped from the group behind me, late 60s, gray hair, the same wide jaw I'd seen in the clearing that night. She was the retired nurse from Bangor whose grandmother had kept a photograph of a red-bearded man and never explained who he was. "I remember you," she said. "I carry your blood. I speak your name." The red-bearded man stopped walking. You could feel it, a pressure releasing in the air of the clearing. He turned, and it wasn't the blind rotation of the loop. It was the turn of a man hearing his name from someone who knows who he is. Peace crossed his face for one moment, clear and complete. Then he aged, steadily, completely. Flesh going thin, bones visible, the red beard fading. He crumbled the way leaves crumble in your palm, gently and all at once, and what he'd been became the ground he'd walked for 177 years. Not violently, gently, like finally being allowed to rest. I read the next name. We worked through all 47 over the course of the morning. Some names had descendants who stepped forward and spoke. Some were spoken by the elders. One, a child of 9 on the payroll ledger. I spoke myself because I had found no one else, and I thought that finding the names at all was worth something. One by one, the walkers stopped. One by one, the clearing gave them back. By noon, it was empty. Just the living, and the post, and the quiet. The state designated the area as sacred land. No trails, no access. I still count my steps sometimes. Mill parking lot, grocery store floor. The counting starts without my permission and runs until I notice it and stop. Caleb does it too. We don't talk about it. Nate sold his truck. Abby moved to Portland. She says she can't look north without her legs wanting to do something. She says it lightly, like a fact she's filed away. Joseph Dana died last spring. He left me a leather pouch of soil from the walking ground with a note. For when you need to remember that some earth holds on to what we give it, be careful what you leave behind. It sits on my windowsill. I went back once, 6 months after the ceremony, pushed through undergrowth to the clearing. The ruins were softer, moss thick on the timber, mushrooms in the crevices, everything settling into the earth the way things do when they're finally allowed. The post still stood with its carved names, and lichen was working at the cuts. It was quiet. Not the weighted silence of the loop, just ordinary forest quiet, birds and wind and the difference between them. I stood there for a long time, not walking, just still. When I left, I didn't look back. Some nights I dream of the 47, not as they were in the loop, but as they might have been before. Josiah laughing around a fire, a woman hanging laundry between 2 spruce trees, children chasing through autumn leaves, not knowing yet that winter is coming. I hope they're resting. I hope we all find rest eventually.